Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our last class of the fall semester, class number 10. Offer congratulations to those of you that are in attendance. I realize this is a busy time of the year, and yet at the same time, we have a good number of the students that are online this afternoon for this last class. We'd like to, last class is always a little bit unusual in the sense that it varies off the beaten path a little bit. Usually it's about a 50-minute class, but with this class, we'd like to start with prayer, kind of an interesting prayer that we'll start with, and it's the one that's in the book called the Long View. This was a prayer that was written for Archbishop Oscar Romero, not by Archbishop Oscar Romero. It was a prayer that was composed by a bishop from Saginaw, Michigan, drafted for a homily by Cardinal John Dearden in November of 1979 for a celebration of departed priest. As a reflection on the anniversary of the martyrdom of Bishop Romero, Bishop Buntner included in a reflection book a passage titled The Mystery of the Romero Prayer. The mystery is that the words of the prayer are attributed to Oscar Romero, but they were never spoken by him. This comes from the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops. For many, many years, I thought the prayer was written by, but really it was written for. So let us remember we're in God's holy presence. It helps now and then to step back and take the long view. The kingdom is not only beyond our efforts, it is even beyond our vision. We accomplish in our lifetime only a tiny fraction of the magnificent enterprise that is God's work. Nothing we do is complete, which is another way of saying that the kingdom always lies beyond us. No statement says all that should be said. No prayer fully expresses our faith. No confession brings perfection. No pastoral visit brings wholeness. No program accomplishes the church's mission. No set of goals and objectives includes everything. But this is what we are about. We plant the seeds that one day will grow. We water seeds already planted, knowing that they hold future promise. We lay foundations that will need further development. We provide yeast that produces effects far beyond our capabilities. We cannot do everything. And there is a sense of liberation in realizing that. This enables us to do something, though, and to do it very well. It may be incomplete, but it is a beginning, a step along the way, an opportunity for the Lord's grace to enter and do the rest. We may never see the end results, but that is the difference between the master builder and the worker. We are workers, not master builders, ministers, not messiahs. We are prophets of a future that is not entirely our own. Amen. I've always loved that prayer because I think, like many that we've seen through this class, this one really does zero in to me and really does focus on what we do in this world of development and advancement. We may never see the end result, but we have taken many, many beginnings. And so as we move into this last class, obviously just recapping as we always do at the beginning of each class, just kind of look at what we've covered here over these last number of months and take a look at what you've been able to keep up with. Thank you for many of you for getting those homework assignments in. Some are struggling at the last minute to get them in, but we fully understand. And so as we look then at the different classes that we've covered, the different areas we've covered, I think it does kind of bring us to a point where we say, in this last class, as we look at all that we've covered, lesson 24 in the book says, be open to change and shifts in thinking and explore new sources of revenue. In lesson 25, with a proactive stance. And so I like to spend, some time with these because to me, this is always changing. This is always happening. Many, many times in our work, we will have people that embrace this philosophy and these processes, but yet their board or their principal or their pastor or people that work with them don't embrace this way of thinking. And so lesson 24 that talks about change and shifts in thinking really becomes a very important lesson, because in many cases it becomes the call to say whether or not you will be able to implement successfully and to the extent that you would like to. And so as we look at this, let's dive on into this. In lesson 24, there are only several slides, and the same thing in lesson 25. There's not a lot of slides, but I would like to share with you. So in terms of being open, to change, in the book, I refer to a passage that I always start when I talk about this work with a school or with a parish. And that is on page 113 of the book, where I say the answers and the solutions that you use to get you where you are today will not be the same answers and solutions that will get you to where you want to be tomorrow. That is so true. I look back when I began in development back in the mid-'80s, and I realize that the changes that have taken place and if you don't change with the time, if you don't change with the culture of people that come into your school, then sometimes it becomes really tough. And so, we have found that there are schools that do the same thing over and over again. But, as we take a look at it, there's shifts in thinking. Now, there are 5 shifts that we refer to on this slide. One is we call the lead buffalo, or the herd of a gaggle of geese who share responsibility. Lead buffalo of the herd, or a gaggle of geese who are going to share responsibility. We've talked about this. Is it a team effort? Are you seeking input? Are you, quote unquote, talking to the customer? Are you shifting that culture where your changes in your goals are not just knee-jerk reaction? I use the example in the book because this happened with a high school I was visiting, where I'm sitting there going to do an in-service to the board, and they asked me to come in and sit in on the board meeting. And in this particular case, the board president said to the principal, listen, you need to raise an additional $40,000 in your annual fund next year. And no indication of how. So as you're taking a look at all of this, are you looking at it from the standpoint of being able to develop with a team? Are you willing to invest and cultivate? Or is it just, the short-term results? Let's do, that whole idea of crisis management becomes the norm. Not going to balance this, so we got to do that. Are you into process rather than program thinking? Process thinking where you're, doing the, as we say, the golf tournament, the raffle calendar, the auction, the dinner dance, the bingo, the Christmas tree sale, is it just one thing after another? Just program thinking. Boom, 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 boom. Instead of the processes that fit into that 7 I's of identifying, informing, inviting, involving, implementing, investing, and improving. Are you building those genuine relationships with people, or just looking at saying, hey, let's get the money? Because, I find that it's really important. I'm working with a capital campaign right now, and there's a president and principal structure. This is a fairly large campaign, $20 million. And there are a handful, half a dozen or more, really strong financial leaders. And of those, all of them have supported the school. There came on the radar screen, by recommendation of one of these financial leaders, that there is a family that has ties to this school, but they go way back and have not been recent. And so in terms of that, the whole idea behind it all was, how then do we move all this forward in terms of establishing a relationship and seeing where the win-win was? And so once again, the president began to reach out as part of the cultivation process. And I remember in one meeting, we were sitting there with the operational chairs, and one of the operational chairs asked the president, how that was moving along in terms of being able to establish a relationship where this particular school could help that family and that individual with various things in the community, and how that family could work with this particular school. And I'll never forget what the president said. He said, I know that the reason why that I'm being invited and asked to cultivate this family is to get a financial gift. I'm not a dumb man. But you know what? I've met 3 times with this gentleman. And whether or not that gift ever comes in, I guarantee you one thing. This gentleman has much more to offer than a financial gift. He is a godly man. We have developed a wonderful friendship. And no doubt, whatever size gift he gives, our friendship, our relationship is very definitely going to last long after any campaign we may have here. And I just wanted to jump up and shout for joy that a Catholic school leader who really had not had a lot of experience in advancement and development really does understand the value of building genuine relationships. And so as we looked at it, we began to realize that, this particular president, although not a lot of advancement experience, really understood what it meant for belonging leads to believing. And so as we look at this and you look at this change and shifts in thinking, do you realize that as you move it on forward, that change as a natural process, are you going to look at it from that particular perspective too? Change as a natural process is the part that basically says, are you willing then to understand that when you go through change of a culture or a shift, that indeed that change is going to bring about some different reactions, the way you set up your advancement efforts, the way you move forward with priorities of a strategic plan, the way you put certain processes in place for the annual appeal, the way you work a special event like an auction or whatever, what you prioritize in terms of your site master plan, what you do in terms of your admissions policies. All of these things are changes. And so we always like to point out that when you deal with change process, we always find that anytime you introduce something new, that 8% are going to be the innovators, 17% are going to be the leaders who are open to change, 29% are going to be the early majority who are usually followers once they've been convinced, 29% we call the late majority, and they're usually very skeptical, but they do come around, and 17% are going to be the destroyers. Now, we use that name destroyers on purpose because that 17% is interested in destroying that initiative, not interested in moving it forward. They are usually adamant about, any kind of change taking place. Working with a parish and an elementary school right now, where these percentages are very interestingly in place. And there are people in the parish who have been there for many, 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 many years and do not want to see that old church renovated, remodeled, and restored. Very adamant about anything like that happening. What's interesting is that as you look at it, those people, once again, in terms of being asked to support, they want cosmetic changes. They don't want any deep changes. working with another parish in the Midwest recently where they moved their church from one community to another. Talk about change process being alive and well. Here was a church that was located in a town that was dying, and the church was being relocated into an area where they relocated. They not only relocated, they built a larger church to hold 800 people, and they christened and dedicated and did everything they needed to do to open that church in August of 2016. And between August of 2016 and January of 2017, 400 new families joined that parish. Once again, as we take a look at change, always be aware that not everyone is going to raise their hand and say, I'm with you. Those percentages we talk about in the book, we find to be very, very true to form. You know, we do talk about that whole idea of change, and we do talk about that idea of realizing that as you move forward, that's why it's so important. If you approach this, as you look here in that first bullet point, when you approach this with a team effort, you know, then your resistance that you may get, that resistance, you can always rely upon the fact that you have sought input. And in terms of seeking that input and getting that buy-in and getting that team approach, you know, you can then move forward and not realize that any final decisions rest just with you. So in terms of being open to change and realizing that there are shifts that you need to take as we talk about this approach to Catholic school advancement development, there is the realization that there will be those who will be critical because they like things the way they are. They are going to stay exactly the way they are in their mind, and nothing really is going to change. And I think I might have used it before, but I've always liked that quote from Shawshank Redemption, and where the guy says, time to get on with the business of living, I'll get on with the business of dying. And so as we talk about development, as we talk about advancement, just think of the meaning of those two words, development, advancement. Developing, advancing. We're talking about getting on with the business of living. Those percentages of change process, once again, just be aware of them. They're usually going to be interesting. The group that is so important, okay, obviously all of them are important, but that late majority group, they are the ones that cause you to cross the T's and dot the I's. Nothing wrong with that group. But once again, realizing that in many cases, as you move through change, all of this is going to take place. As you take a look at lesson 25, because lesson 25 does, you know, deal with some rather interesting ideas. You know, one of the things that is that we start lesson 25, chapter 25 off is we've always stated the following, that the age-old model of trying to fund Catholic schools with tuition, subsidy, and fundraising events is obsolete, ineffective, and will cease to sustain our schools in the future. We have always said that. You've heard me indicate that in this class, and I still believe it. I see it all the time. So in terms of this, we, you know, basically have what we call the level one focus, so to speak. In other words, what we're saying is that in order to move all this forward, you know, there are some suggestions that we make. And so in terms of this, if we're going to stop this downward spiral of raising tuition when the budget does not balance, or telling the development office to increase the annual fund with no strategies, as I indicated a little earlier, on how to make that happen, or adding more fundraisers, or freezing teachers' salaries, or cutting out needed programs because they throw off the budget, if we're going to do that, then we really are not going to develop and advance. And so we have 7 suggestions that are here. We maintain that on all levels, and we see this day to day, that Catholic school leaders need to make a decision. Are we going to fully support Catholic schools and use creative means and use every possible resource? Or are we just going to say, well, let the strong ones survive? Decisions must be made. And this runs across all dioceses. It runs across all dioceses, and in many cases runs through many parishes and schools. In terms of that, are we going to stand up in the pulpit and say we are in favor of Catholic school education? Or are we going to do that only during Catholic Schools Week? And if we say that we have many families in our parish who could not afford the tuition at our Catholic school, our Catholic elementary school, and we have many families in our parish that cannot afford tuition in our Catholic high school, and because of that, we are not going to promote the Catholic schools from the pulpit, from the bulletin, from verbal announcements and pronouncements. If we're going to say that, then let's flip the coin over and say, what are we doing about developing innovative, creative programs and processes to make sure any family that does want to attend a Catholic school is able to do it? That's what we mean. That's what we mean. I've had many, many long conversations with pastors and finance council members in regards to whether or not just to make Catholic schools for the ones who just can afford it. So that becomes a suggestion. Make decisions. Seek the best wisdom. We have many people, you have many people in your community, and through different processes of think tanks and workshops and flip chart sessions and cup of coffee meetings, bring those challenges to those business leaders, to those corporate leaders, to those community leaders, to those political leaders, to those people in your community, those civic leaders that can offer perspective. Talk with an alum, talk with a parent, talk with a past parent, talk with a vendor, talk with a business owner, and say, these are the challenges we face. How would you solve them? We must seek the best wisdom. Attend the conferences. Go to the NCA convention. Go to the NCDC convention. Go to the ICSC convention. Go to those regional workshops. Plug into the NCA leadership conferences that take place throughout the year. Seek the best wisdom. Number 3, if we're going to do all this, we have to make sure that we have vision and we're outstanding in all ways. We can't be touting our Catholic school if we can't back it up. And we must realize that our Catholic schools are Catholic. And our Catholic schools must build those strong faith communities. And as you've heard me say, every single Catholic family must be personally engaged. We had a whole chapter, a lesson that dealt with that. Strongly believe that becomes so important. Figure out ways to make that happen. And I also believe that parishioners must be invited, convinced, and engaged. I'm not talking just about a parochial school. I'm talking about Catholic high schools. You have parishes that feed into you. Engage those parishioners. Figure out ways to make it happen. Be innovative. Do things that are different. Finance councils and Catholic school leaders must explore new ways of doing things. You know, it's proven over and over again that our Catholic schools are the greatest evangelizers of our Catholic faith on a daily, consistent basis. No, don't believe that just because I go once a week to the PSR program or Religious Ed or CCD, whatever name you're using, you know, that's going to be as valuable as a Catholic school every day where prayer is offered every day. And in many cases, every class. And liturgy is offered if I want it every day, or at least one, or you know, on a weekly or monthly basis. I'm not going to believe that is not worth saving. And so as we look at this and we look at that, you know, let's move to this next level. There are 4 sources as we take a look at sources of revenue. You know, there are 4 basic sources. You know, there's the family, there's the Catholic school, there's the parish, and there's the diocese. Now, if you're a high school, there still is the parish, because you have your students who come from the parish or parishes. So in terms of this and looking at this level 2 focus, as we say, what would be new sources of revenue? Well, you've got some ones that you cover the old base. With a family, there's the same old tuition, subsidy, fees and fundraising support. Okay. But what about gifts in kind? What about those type of gifts? What about gifts of professional service? What about working with a family where you can help them generate revenue? What do I mean by that? Well, we know some schools that basically says the family needs to generate money in order to help pay tuition for their daughter, for their son, or for sons and daughters. And so therefore the school works with them in order to offer different types of fund revenue generating events that family can run, that can do. Give you a perfect example. I'm not saying this is applicable in your case, but here in New Orleans, we have a Superdome. And in the Superdome, we have football games and all kinds of events, concerts and everything. Well, in this one particular school that I'm thinking of, there's a family that mans the booth. They man the booth, one of the booths in the Superdome. And basically in manning that booth, they get all their family members. And during those 7 or 8 home games of the New Orleans Saints, they generate net profit over $20,000 that pays the way for their children to go to that Catholic school. I'm just giving an example. I'm not saying to go do that because you may or may not have a Superdome in your city. Cost-based, needs-based tuition. Cost-based, needs-based tuition is certainly ways that dioceses have tried it. Of course, that means that whatever it does cost, then that is what you charge to those who can afford it. In some communities, it's worked well. Others community, it's been a backfire. What about students working in the community? What about the model of the Cristo Rey communities and schools? What about family work study program? There are things that families can do in terms of exploring new sources of revenue. There are things that families can do if you take a look at setting it up. There are things that the school does, our tuition, subsidy, fundraising events, and then there are the development efforts we've talked about. If you get them established correctly, annual fund and capital campaign and endowed growth and planned giving, memorial giving, major gift portfolios, and the school working with the families for cost-based, needs-based tuition, business and corporate sponsorships. What about opening a business? I know one school that took a classroom and made a printing shop out of it. And they actually do printing for that community. And the prices are reduced. It's no high 4-color, that type of thing, but they do basic things, brochures and pamphlets and flyers and everything of this nature. And that particular business at this school generates over $60,000 a year. And they staff it with parents, they staff it with students, they staff it with people who need to work in order to help toward their tuition. What about retail schools within the school? Retail sales within the school? Right now, I'm sure you got your little bookshop and well, what if you up that? What if you up that? I know of several schools that have upped it so much that they generate over $100,000 in revenue with retail sales, especially during Christmas time, where they move into all kinds of different ways that they can do this. They not only sell the T-shirts and the caps and the this and the that, they open up a whole different market. It depends on how we want to look at things. Depends on how we want to deal with this challenge of being able to create revenue. That becomes the real key, to make something like that happen. Got a bunch of questions, and I'll definitely get to those questions as we move forward. As you take a look then at the school, then let's take a look at the parish. Well, same old is offer subsidy. Whether it's subsidy as maybe the elementary school is a parochial school, or whether I've got students going to a school and I'm going to give, $400 for a student to go, whatever that is. Then of course, have you looked at the total stewardship model? That's the Diocese of Wichita model. That model was established back in the 80s What about in terms of the parish with work-study programs, where you're able to look at this from the standpoint of working with families who work in the parish, who work in the school, and that allows them, for to link to the school by the work that they do in the parish, and so it's an even kind of exchange, and of course there is the diocese programs like grants and vouchers, and there's several dioceses that have done and are doing right now diocesan-wide campaigns for Catholic schools. The Archdiocese of Denver has a foundation, Seeds of Hope, in which helps fund Catholic schools, and that is with an annual appeal every year. New governance through collaborative models and regionalization. There's all kind of different ways to look at moving through all of this. Obviously, what we always say is that there's not one size that's going to fit everything. I can assure you of that. There's not one size that fits all. But there are opportunities that do provide different ways of looking at things. They really do. It depends on whether or not we want to lock into what we've always done, or whether or not we want to sit down with our parish and look at innovative ways, whether or not we want to sit down with the diocese, whether or not we want to sit down with each individual family in terms of moving things forward. As you look at all of this, here's some thoughts. We've done this. We've covered some of this, and some of this is brand new. But this is kind of a summation of how can you generate creative revenue. Adopt a student programs, and I'm sure some of you have this. But how well do you promote it? How well does your community know that maybe there are 10, 15, 20, 5, 30, 50, depending on size of the community and the school, students who cannot afford to come to your Catholic school? How much do you promote the fact that you need people to adopt them as a student and help pay their tuition? Maybe in a $10,000 tuition, I'm just using round figures because I was an English teacher. Maybe in a $10,000 tuition, maybe that family can handle $4,000. But they need to be adopted maybe for the other. What about, as we said, a school business? What about educating better your parents on incentive programs like, in many dioceses, they have the script program. How well do you educate on that? What about, as we said, the visits and the conversations with each individual family? The family work study programs where families then can work, to make things happen. Let's say you've got things at school that you're going to pay an outside vendor to do, but you have families who can do them. You have people who can do that. What about that total stewardship model from the Diocese of Wichita? What about business and corporate sponsorships, where they can sponsor different things within the school? What's an example is a business with a school that I know just got finished sponsoring a maker's lab, the 3D printers. They have their corporate name on it, and it's been sponsored. And once again, great ceremony, but a wonderful, great addition to the school. What about a gift catalog? I know schools that offer gift catalogs where they then will present to their alums, to their parents, to their past parents, a catalog of items that are needed for the school that if they would have them funded, they would not have to take this out of operational. This could be equipment for the athletic department. This could be equipment for the science lab. This could be equipment for anything. This could be things that you would need. And instead, you put together a gift catalog that then is sent out to all of your alums. Or let's say during Catholic Schools Week, you gave this gift catalog out, to your parishioners at all the masses and asked their support of helping fund one or more of these items in the gift catalog. Once again, how creative do we want to be? I know some schools that have established their 501c3 foundation. And basically that foundation allows people then to give to a foundation, and that foundation gives the money back to the school, and it is a wonderful opportunity to develop that third source funding. It's foreign student programs. There are at least a half a dozen schools we've worked with in the last 2 years that, based upon, their principals, this is primarily, obviously, secondary schools, where their principals have gone to foreign countries and they have gotten, go through the different companies that handle this. As you know, many of you know all this already, but that ability then to connect that, to diversify that student body, to bring more revenue into the school, to be able to work that type of foreign student program, which in many cases tuition is much higher. Once again, that is something to examine. Underwritten facility projects. There are many examples of facilities that maybe they're not big ones where you need a capital campaign. You'd rather not take it out of the operational budget, but you really would like to build that new playground for those children that are in your pre-K program, your kindergarten program, your first grade program. And so therefore, then that whole idea is presented to families, or presented to businesses, or presented to the community. The underwritten facility projects, as we said earlier, the increased retail sales, all of these are things that, as we look at it, become, I think, something worthwhile considering as you look at this whole idea of making all of this work in some kind of way. If you're going to just rely on tuition and subsidy, I'm mainly talking more than likely about parish subsidy and fundraising events. Eventually, the well's going to run dry. So therefore, you've got to kick in a vibrant development advancement effort. You've got to kick in creative sources of revenue. I do not, just to be clear, tuition, subsidy, and fundraising events, okay, that does not include, in my mind, things like the major donor work, your annual appeal fund work, your capital campaign work, your plan giving work, your memorial giving work, your endowed giving work. That's not tuition. That's not subsidy. And that's not a fundraising event. That is a strong, vibrant development advancement effort that, once again, you could move forward to. So, as you look at this, and you move all of this forward and you begin to do this, when you do this and how you do this, because it greatly depends upon, your overall plan. What is, we'll go back to what we have always talked about, and that is, what is your vision? What is your mission? What is your wow? What are your top 10 selling points? What are you trying? That becomes the common denominator of it all. It becomes the ability then to move things forward because, you've got that act, so to speak, together. So, as you look at all of this, I think it really becomes important as we look at it. These are some themes that we have really spent some time on during this class. That development is the meaningful involvement. Without vision, we do perish. What is yours? Question that came up, and I'll get into a little bit later, is what do we do right now? Well, to me right now, how can you go generate revenue unless you can show a vision, unless you can show a plan, unless you can show your outstanding characteristics, your top, 10? How can you do that? I don't know how you can do that. Because if you come to a donor and you say, listen, please help me. Our school's about to close. We're in tough shape. Please help bail us out. You're going to get some revenue, but it's nothing that's going to be substantial. Nobody wants to give to a sinking ship. So that vision becomes important. Those 7 I's, as we've talked about over and over again, that sentence of belonging leads to believing that we've already talked about. That second to last bullet point. We've stated that particular, quote, so to speak, over and over again. That you've got to have quality Catholic identity, leadership, as we look at it. What is your wow? We've talked about that. It all goes back to that leadership and attitude, move from reactive culture to proactive. That core team is important. Remember, the most important thing is enrollment management. That acronym we use of affirming, welcoming, engaging culture. So and then in the book, there, in the text there on page 121, if you have time, just read it, because I do talk about some parting thoughts in terms of growing up on a farm in South Louisiana. And believe it or not, there's a great analogy between all of that, So as you look at all of this, and we've raised some issues, we've raised some questions. This last class always does, raise some questions. And here's one right now. We're struggling to get enough volunteers to run things by the current system of subsidy, tuition, fundraisers. It seems that we need a whole separate group to begin doing things in a new and different way. We can't just stop doing what we're doing, Cole. We need to continue to raise funds, because it is an integral part of our budget. This is what scares me. The manpower needed to begin these new programs like coffee hours, calls, visits. I feel like we're spread very thin right now. Do you have any suggestions? I mean, yes, this whole class is my suggestion. But once again, it's like, don't take on world hunger. Start with something. Let's go back. That's why I started with this prayer. No set of goals and objectives includes everything. We lay foundations that will need further development. We cannot do everything, and there is a sense of liberation in realizing that. But yet we can do something. We can do it very well. It may be incomplete, but it is a beginning, as the prayer says. Okay, don't stop what you're doing. You do need those fundraising events right now. Just for 17, 18, keep what you've got. But take a look at the future. If someone, in presenting this question to me, because I'm presented this question fairly often, I always answer it, this way. I always say, okay, there's two things that are very, very important. First of all, is have you answered the question, what is your vision? What is your mission? What are your top 10 selling points? And what is your wow? Now, if you say, yes, we've answered that, and you still have trouble involving and engaging people, then I would question whether or not that wow and that vision is exciting, or may be exciting, but is it being articulated in an exciting way? So that's the first base to cover. I would bring together those different groups, and share that with them. The second is start with something. Let's say you're a high school. I don't know. I can't tell from the question who's asking it. But let's say you're a high school. Well, in the spring of the year, bring your 9th grade parents in. Bring your 10th grade, 11th, and 12th. That's 4 coffees. Carve out those 4 times in the spring, January, February, and March, preferably to do them. Carve that out, and present to them some challenges that you face as a school, maybe 2 or 3 of them. Share with them the good news. Share them the vision. Share with them the top selling points. Share with them the accomplishments of the fall semester. Start off that way. Then say, as we look at the spring semester and look toward, 18, 19 school year and beyond, there are 2 or 3 challenges that we feel as a school we face. And so we're inviting classes to come in and share your thoughts and your ideas with us. Okay? Share maybe one challenge is, how can we educate and best let parents know what it really does cost to run this Catholic school? Okay? So, maybe another question is, how can we better invite, involve, and engage our parents, our parishioners, and our alumni into our school, where they can work hand in hand, arm in arm, shoulder to shoulder with us to advance our school? Maybe those are the two questions you bring to those 4 coffees. And guess what? Have flip chart paper there and write all their answers up there. And then make sure, here's the key, folks. Now, please listen to this piece. The person or the persons who are asking these types of questions, this is the key. This is the key. Make sure every single person, whether it's 7 people who come or 70 people who come, make sure, okay, that you really, really are going to have a sheet of paper that you can put in everyone's hands, and you have name, you have first question, second question, for them to fill in their individual input sheet. Not enough for them to offer suggestions, because many will not. They don't want to open their mouth in front of a group of people. But then down there at the bottom, make sure, if you would like to further help us in implementing and working with us to move these new initiatives forward, please check here. All right? Please check here. Now, I guarantee you, I've never seen a situation, never, in 27 years, where when you do something like this, you know, you're not going to get 30 to 40% or more of the people checking the blocks that'd like to help you. Working with a school right now who, in the annual appeal, it's a school of around 400 families. In the annual appeal, they invited the gift of prayer, the gift of service, and the gift of financial participation, obviously. All right? Of those 400 families, we have received 280 intention cards back. We look to pick up the rest in the spring. 44 people have checked the gift of service. Guess what? In the month of December, we then sent them a sheet that listed the many opportunities for them to help with and work with. All right? That's not enough. We've got one person from the core team who comes in 3 times a week and calls to go through that form with everyone and find out what they want to become involved with. It once again is a shift in thinking. It's moving from paper to people. It's moving from that whole idea of making this work because you realize that, you know, we've got to do some things different. You know, we've got to do that. We've got to do things different. Okay? You know, what do we mean by increased retail sales? Well, you know, maybe in your bookstore or whatever, you're only selling one thing. You know, maybe you're only handling different things. Well, take a look at that. I know one high school that was just doing the normal, and they were making $15,000 a year and selling their sweatshirts and their T-shirts and their caps and their this and that and the other. All of a sudden, they took a look at different forms of clothing. You know, all of a sudden they triple their retail sales. So, you know, as you look at all of this, I think it's important that you realize there are different ways of viewing it. You know, so as we kind of move toward the home stretch here, don't forget the final exam assignment. You've seen it before. Thank you for those of you that have sent it in. Then, once again, those who qualify will receive their certificates in CEU credits from the University of Dayton in January. We'll be sending those out at the mid to late January. Please share your thoughts in the pop-up survey. Now, in that survey, it asks some questions, so it'll be really helpful for you to get that information to us. At the NCAA convention in Cincinnati, we're going to do a reception on Wednesday, April 4th from 5 to 7 p.m. It's going to be at the Hilton, which is one of the main hotels. And so please let us know if you're going to be there, because we'd like to invite you to that reception. Thursday, on April 5th, I'm going to speak on 9:30 a.m. And then there's the workbook signing after that, but just thought I'd mention it. But mainly the reception, would love to have you there. As we look to the future, we're going to continue with online classes. We have almost a full slate of people signed up for the spring class. Don't forget our executive summer session on the UD campus, the advanced online classes. We're going to invite all of you. We're going to delve further with another class in the fall of 2018, and this will be an online class for credit. And we'll give you more information about that, where those of you that want to continue learning this way, will have that opportunity. We are working and creating a new book and workbook that is geared to Catholic parishes. Whereas 25 lessons learned in Catholic school development, this will be a workbook and a book that will be geared to lessons learned in Catholic parish and stewardship work. We will also be offering this summer or fall an online class for parish leaders. And then obviously with the ISPD services. The summer course, as we have indicated, June 26th and 28th, open only for students who have taken this course. Please let us know if you're interested. We probably, as of today, have about 35 or 40 people registered if my assistant was giving me the right information the other day. So if you're interested, please make sure that you let us know. Really important. Couple other things. Obviously, your commitment and dedication. We have students that have not missed a class, and you're to be applauded because with Catholic school schedules, obviously that becomes sometimes really interesting. Really interesting. I'd like to share with you in closing what I did for the last class, and realizing we've got a few minutes. Those of you that have gotten the workbook, and I just would like to share this last thing. It'll take me about 5 minutes to get through, but I would like to share it with you. Hopefully you'll understand when I'm finished why I'm sharing it. I believe that in order to be successful in anything we do, we have to have passion and a desire to be the very best we can be. I often refer to that as fire in the belly. By that, I do not mean being the top dog or the star or the hot shot. I just simply mean taking the gifts that God has given us, developing those gifts, continuously working to improve them, and then making them work for the good of our cause, our causes. In our work across the country at ISPD, we see many people who possess that fire in the belly. As pastors, superintendents, principals, presidents, development officers, board members, faculty and staff members, parent leaders, alumni leaders, Catholic consultants, and believers in Catholic schools and parish life, we all have similar missions: to develop and enhance our Catholic institutions by engaging people to help us build the kingdom of God. This is an awesome task and responsibility. As many of us know, this work is not for the weak of heart. It is not for those who quit early. It is not for those who want to raise a quick buck or hit somebody up for money. Being part of a vibrant Catholic development advancement effort is rewarding, enriching, and fulfilling. Done properly for the right reasons, this ministry of ours that you and I have been working with for the last 5 months, this ministry helps us to develop and grow as stewards. It puts order into our lives, and we realize that our lives are not just about us. They're about doing God's work and what He wants to develop and advance. Properly understood, our ministry calls us to reach out as Jesus did, and despite the naysayers and those who only want to guard their kingdom, bring people closer to Him. Over time, we develop a burning desire to draw people into our faith community and invite them to stand with us and walk alongside us for a lifetime. In our Catholic diocese, schools, and parishes, we can impact so many lives. From the child with a smiling face who gets out of the car in the carpool line in the morning, to the person we only see at Easter, to the student or athlete who does not believe in herself or himself. Directly or indirectly, we all make a huge difference. But where do we develop this passion? How do we come to realize that this work of Catholic school development is so much more than running a fundraiser or tapping someone for money? How do we get away from always measuring what we do by the question, how much money did you raise? True Catholic school development is much deeper, and we invite you to explore the ways that you can continue to connect to its true meaning and discover or rediscover that fire in the belly. What are the vehicles that led you to your ministry? And so I'd like to share my journey. In 1986, I lost my 5-year-old son, Dustin. He died of an illness that impacts few children. One day he was here, and then 4 days later he was not. What adds deeper meaning to his passing is that he started complaining about his legs cramping on Good Friday, and then he passed away on Easter Monday afternoon. In the Lenten season, our family's faith becomes magnified through the remembrance of his death. Dustin was a very likable child, always smiling, always laughing, always having a cheery twinkle in his eye. He attended St. Rosalie Catholic School in Harvey, Louisiana, and was a favorite of many of his teachers and the principal, Sister Jeanne. He was elected king of the Mardi Gras at the school and loved every minute of the attention. He was hardly ever down or sad, and even when he was punished, he would always bounce back. Only in a matter of minutes, he'd be back at it. One day he came home from school and announced he was going to be a priest. 5 years old and a priest. Although Dustin always had a smile and a kind word, he frequently battled with illnesses, and so that week of Easter, it really wasn't a huge surprise when he complained about cramping in his legs. On Friday, his mother took him to the doctor, and then on Sunday, he was in the hospital, supposedly, just for precaution. By Monday morning, things had turned for the worst, and he was rushed to the operating room with a heart attack. And it was then we realized he might be in his last hours. I will never forget the doctor at Ochsner Hospital coming to us in tears and saying, "We have done all that we can do. He will not live much longer. So please go now and say your goodbyes." You know, it's funny how moments like that are branded into your mind. I remember walking into the OR and looking at my son as he lay on the operating table. He was in pain, but he still had that smile. And as I tried to maintain my composure, he looked up, and the last words that he said to me were, "Daddy, I'm going to be with Jesus." Dustin passed away Easter Monday afternoon at 3:42. The next year was a blur. I was offered a job teaching English at Mercy Academy in New Orleans during that 86-87 school year. Sister Mary Ann Hardcastle, Mercy's sister, hired me. I really don't know how I made it through that year. The pain was great, and getting up every morning was a chore. All of us who have lost loved ones know the feelings and the struggles, and yet there's a faint desire to overcome and build something that will take us to the next day, sometimes even the next hour. Two thoughts kept running through my mind that year. I had a sociology teacher in college, Dr. Ben Kaplan, who, quoting Eleanor Roosevelt, once told us how much better it was to light a candle than to curse the darkness. I remembered that, and I also remembered my son's last words. Those were the two threads that I hung on to, one of hope and one of faith. Time moved on. The healing began. Life may shut a lot of doors, but God always gives us a window. We just need to find it. Gradually, the pain moved into energy, and I developed a strong desire to do something meaningful, something that would make a difference. I moved into administration and then into development at Mercy Academy, and then in 1989, there was a voice inside of me calling out to begin a new ministry, and with a leap of faith, I left the security of a regular Catholic school paycheck and started the Institute for School and Parish Development, ISPD. I've never looked back. The fire that burned so strongly years ago is still alive and still as powerful as ever. So many times as I leave home and head out on the road for another week in another city, I ask myself, why am I doing this? And the answer comes back immediately. You do it because of Dustin. And because you have gifts to share and a family that believes in and supports you. There was a reason my son was able to say what he did, and I owe it to the faith community of St. Rosalie Parish and School. They were very instrumental in developing Dustin's faith, so much so that even when he was faced in his final calling, he was able to say, "Daddy, I'm going to be with Jesus." He did not get to that point alone. The pastor, a principal, his teachers, they were all responsible for bringing him to that point in his life. And I cannot help but believe that Christ was there to hold his hand as he crossed to the other side. The death of my son was the birth of this ministry, this company. In my anguish, God gave me a lifeline and hope for the future. And I've been blessed countless times since 1986 with my wife, Susie, and my daughter, Megan, my older daughters, Lisa, Shannon, and Cherie, and 9 grandchildren. My oldest grandson, Jordan, was born the day after Dustin's birthday, September 26. Doesn't God work in very wonderful ways? Years ago, we started the Dustin Ewing Donaldson Memorial Scholarship at St. Rosalie, where at graduation, a member of our family has the opportunity to award an outstanding graduate who is going to continue his or her education in a Catholic high school with scholarship money for the first year. The faculty and staff vote on the recipient. A plaque with Dustin's picture hangs in the lobby of St. Rosalie Catholic School. Fire in the belly. It pushes us onward, brings about introspection, motivation, and purpose. My journey is not unique. There are hundreds just like me. However, my quest has always been the same, to work with a diocese or a Catholic school or a parish, and through the gifts God had given me, to really make a difference in helping build a stronger faith community, and possibly even in the smallest degree. through this ministry to help bring others and myself closer to Christ, so that we all, in our final hour, may be able to say, Daddy, I'm going to be with Jesus. But I'd share that with you. I always felt that this work does call for a passion, does call for a desire, does call for a sense of being able to go above just thinking of things as give me the money. And I think that as we look at it, and as we wrap this class up, if we've been able to offer anything at all in terms of motivation, it would be that you certainly are doing so much to help build the kingdom of God. I have thoroughly enjoyed sharing with you. I continue to really enjoy the final exam work that continues to come in. Thank you so much for all of that. And once again, we hope that we'll see you at the NCA convention. We hope we'll see some of you in summer classes. We hope that our summer executive session. We hope that some of you will continue on with us as we take a look at advanced classes and moving them down the road. So from all of us here at ISPD, it's been a pleasure, and really hope this has been helpful to you. There is a pop-up survey that will help us evaluate this course, take you about 3 or 4 minutes to fill it in. And to all of us here, we wish you ending a very blessed Advent and a very Merry Christmas, and we hope that your new year is a joyous one, and thank you all. God bless.